this popped up this morning. Well, it popped up in my news this morning, but it was put out last night, of the detaining of 6 Chinese men who arrived in remote Western Australia community by boat. So it said an off-duty officer located them north of Kalamburu on Monday, but another article I'd read said that the locals had found them wandering around the area. But basically, a group of 6 Chinese nationals who police say travelled to Australia by boat have been detained after they were discovered in a remote community at the northern tip of Western Australia. An off-duty police officer located them on Monday. It established they'd arrived via an unknown vessel as part of a group. Search for the remaining group members found 4 more men on Tuesday. So they were Chinese nationals. ABF had taken over, and they've now been detained, but no further comment will be made. In more than 3,000 cases from Perth and a population of 388. Follows a similar incident in the north of Western Australia in February last year, in which a group of 20 men who said they were from Pakistan and Bangladesh were found in a remote indigenous community at Beagle Bay. And again in 2023, a dozen Pakistani asylum seekers arrived on a remote stretch of Western Australia's coastline in the Kimberley, then taken and handled in terms of that. No, that's it. Okay. This has been something that there's been whispers of for decades, really. They've been, scuttlebutt. There's been, I guess, chatter coming out of those regions saying, like the remote northwest of Australia, saying that people have found like fishing boats washed up on a shore with nobody on them. And the assumption some of the times, based on the amount of waste and what's been seen around the boat, is that it was actually a people smuggling or PIIs, potential illegal immigrants, people attempting to come to Australia, and they've made landfall in a remote part of the country. They then disappeared into the bush, never to be seen again. And that it had been happening since at least the Vietnam War era. I've heard stories of multiple boats, not all at once, but over time there have been boats being found, potentially people just having no idea how many people had come ashore, if any of them had survived. Basically, if they hadn't hit the highway and made contact with anyone or intercepted traffic, no one was going to know they're there. I mean, it's similar sort of things for landings in the Gulf of Carpentaria. There's whole stretches of coastline there where, short of an opportunistic find by someone sailing past or flying past, no one's going to know a boat's made landfall and let people off or anything like that. But it's one of the things that Australia was putting in its advertisements overseas against people smuggling during the early thousands, indicate, like, putting out there just how dangerous the environment is in the approaches to Australia, maritime approaches, and if you'd made landfall, you were out of the frying pan and into the fire. Unless you'd been fortunate enough to land near some form of settlement or close enough to the highway at the time other people were driving past, your chances of successfully surviving the Australian terrain in that area were slim to none. And there's a part of these stories are saying that there's an unknown number of people who've made landfall like that in the last 40 odd years that have just vanished into the bush. Not because they've vanished and then appeared in the big cities later on or in the other communities. They've just disappeared altogether. And that those that have arrived and made contact, such as this example, are the extraordinarily lucky ones. well, not so much to get through the border protection patrols and stuff like that to make landfall. That's pretty lucky in its own. But to have been found alive after landfall is mind-bogglingly incredible. A lot of people just don't get how remote and dangerous that part of the country is. Even for people who live here in the country, it's, well, I don't know if it's a designated remote area. I know parts of Kosciuszko are designated remote areas, but it's, human habitation is few and far between. I mean, there were attacks against Australian mainland there during World War II, for example, up at Broome, but also they had aviation and shipping wrecks along there during World War II, along the northwest coast, the Kimberley regions and stuff like that. It's very, 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 very sparsely populated, ineffectively unpopulated, and it is extraordinarily a harsh environment to be in. And so the fact that these guys made it ashore and were found alive, fantastic. Lucky, 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 lucky them. Question about Chinese nationals. That's an interesting one. Presumably they may be making claims to be of an oppressed ethnic group within China. But to say that they're Chinese nationals aren't normally part of illegal migration into Australia at the moment. You'd say there's very little reason for it unless they're coming from a group like, from a group, a non-Han ethnic group within China. But then the question is, how did they make it to Australia? Like, what was their pathway? Was there overland path and then maritime path to get to where they did? In the past, it's been Afghani, Iraqi, even Pakistani, Sri Lankan, some Southeast Asian groups as well, trying to make the trip down. But Chinese, not really. So it's interesting that it is a group of Chinese that were found. But yeah, it's a extraordinarily fortunate outcome for them. And yeah, potentially it would have been a boat washed up on the shore. Did they even say they found the boat? No, didn't. Potentially, if they'd not been found there, they may never have been found.